The Big Red One was not just a war epic. It was a 30-year battle for cinematic truth, a film so personal and so brutal it was systematically dismantled by the studio that financed it. What audiences saw in 1980 was a shadow of the movie Sam Fuller, a hardened World War II veteran, had fought his entire life to create. Behind the scenes of this gritty masterpiece, a different kind of war raged, one with the director's lifelong obsession, a star's haunted past, a future icon's career gamble, and a 4-hour cut of the film so powerful it was considered too much for audiences to handle. These are not just production notes. They are the battle scars from a fight to show war as it truly was. Today, we are storming the beaches of film history with 20 weird facts about the Big Red One. And stay tuned to the end for a bonus fact about the film's lost footage that is so incredible, it sounds like a Hollywood movie plot. Number 20. The title comes from a nickname earned in blood. The Big Red One was not just a cool, evocative title. It was the nickname of the real United States Army 1st Infantry Division, a unit Sam Fuller served in with distinction. What audiences did not know was that the name and the iconic red one shoulder patch came from the division's brutal experiences in World War I. Their supply trucks were forced to paint a large red one on their sides to distinguish them from French forces, making them a constant target for German artillery. It was not just a designation, it was a target painted on their backs. The name was earned through sheer casualties and courage. When Fuller chose this title, he was not just naming his movie, he was invoking the spirit of a unit that had been through hell and back, a legacy of survival that became the central theme of his entire body of work. The film is, in essence, a love letter to that bloody patch. Number 19, the film's famous hand motif was a deliberate symbol. Watch the film closely and you will notice a recurring motif, the sergeant's hand. Lee Marvin's character is constantly reaching for his men, pulling them from danger, steadying them, and leading them forward. What audiences did not know was that this was a deliberate, deeply personal symbol for Sam Fuller. The sergeant's hand is not just a hand, it is the hand of God, the hand of fate, the hand of a father figure trying to shepherd his sons through the apocalypse. Fuller, who lost friends in the war, saw the sergeant as a force of life in a world of death, and his hand was the instrument of that life. It was not just a recurring image, it was the film's visual thesis. In a movie filled with death and chaos, the image of a hand reaching out to save someone becomes the ultimate act of defiance, a quiet, powerful statement that humanity can still exist in the most inhumane of circumstances. Number 18. Robert Carradine was cast because he looked like he would survive. The role of Zab, the squad's aspiring writer and narrator, was crucial. He was the audience's eyes and ears, the man who would survive to tell the tale. Sam Fuller did not want a typical Hollywood pretty boy. He wanted someone who looked like they could endure. What audiences did not know was that Fuller cast Robert Carradine specifically because of his gaunt, haunted look. Carradine was not just an actor, he was the physical embodiment of a survivor. Fuller famously told him, "You have the face of a man who has seen things but is not broken yet." This was not just a casting choice, it was a search for authenticity. Carradine's performance, often overshadowed by Marvin and Hamill, is the quiet, steady heartbeat of the film, the lens through which we witness the madness. He was not just playing a part, he was fulfilling Fuller's vision of the witness, the one who carries the story. Number 17, the actors underwent a brutal, realistic weapons training. This was not a Hollywood boot camp where actors learned to look good holding a rifle. Sam Fuller, a man who had seen combat, demanded absolute realism. What audiences did not know was that he put his entire squad of actors through a grueling, week-long weapons training course led by military advisors. They were not just learning how to aim and fire, they were learning how to strip, clean, and reassemble their weapons blindfolded, how to move as a unit, and how to respond to incoming fire. It was not just preparation, it was an indoctrination. The goal was to make the weapon handling so second nature that the actors would not have to think about it on camera. Mark Hamill later said the training was so intense it gave him a small, permanent scar on his hand from a rifle's hot barrel. This was not just method acting, it was a full immersion into the physical reality of being a soldier, creating an on-screen authenticity that still holds up today. Number 16. The film's score was a last-minute replacement. The music that underscores the film's journey is a unique, minimalist, and haunting score, but it was not the original plan. What audiences did not know was that the first composer was fired late in the game, and composer Dana Kaproff was brought in with only a few weeks to write and record an entire score. It was not just a tight deadline, it was a creative sprint. Kaproff's solution was to avoid the bombastic, patriotic music typical of war films and instead create a simple, recurring theme that evolved with the characters. The score is built around a mournful trumpet solo, representing the loneliness and endurance of the infantryman. It was not just background music, it was a sound of survival. This last-minute pressure cooker resulted in one of the most distinctive and effective war film scores of the 1980s, a piece of music that perfectly captures the film's somber, reflective tone. Number 15. The film's episodic structure was a deliberate artistic choice. Some critics found the what film structure jumping from North Africa to Sicily to France to Belgium to be disjointed. What audiences did not know was that this was Sam Fuller's precise intention. He was not making a traditional narrative with a clear 3-act structure. He was making a campaign film. The story was not about a single mission. It was about the relentless, grinding, and often random nature of the war itself. It was not a story, it was a slog. Each episode is a separate vignette, a small story of survival that adds up to a larger portrait of the infantry experience. Fuller wanted the audience to feel the disorientation and exhaustion of his squad, never knowing where they were going next or what horror awaited them. This was not sloppy storytelling. It was a brilliant and deliberate use of form to mirror content, making the viewer feel like just another grunt in the big red one. Number 14. The film is a fierce anti-authority statement. Beneath the surface of a war film lies a deep-seated contempt for authority. Sam Fuller, a veteran, had no love for the generals and politicians who sent young men to die from the safety of their command post. What audiences did not know was that the film is filled with subtle and not-so-subtle jabs at the high command. The sergeant's famous line, "If you are gonna be a fool, you gotta be tough," is a direct criticism of the foolish decisions made by those in power. The film consistently shows the enlisted men suffering because of the incompetence or indifference of their superiors. It was not just a war movie, it was a critique of the military-industrial complex from a man who had served on its front lines. Fuller's message is clear. The real heroes are not the men giving the orders, but the men following them, even when they know those orders are wrong. Number 13. The film was a box office bomb and critically misunderstood. Today, The Big Red One is hailed as a masterpiece, but in 1980, it was a commercial and critical failure. What audiences did not know was that the film was released in a severely truncated version that stripped it of its power, leaving critics and audiences confused. They were not seeing Fuller's vision, they were seeing a shadow of it. Reviews were mixed, with many calling it episodic and lacking a clear point, completely missing the deliberate structure. It was not just a flop, it was a cinematic tragedy. The film's failure devastated Fuller, who felt his life story had been mutilated and then rejected by the public. It would take over 2 decades for the film's reputation to be rescued, not by a re-release, but by the restoration of the footage that had been so cruelly cut away. Number 12, Mark Hamill took the role to escape Luke Skywalker. Casting the biggest movie star in the world to play a grunt in a gritty, low-budget war film was a strange move, but for Mark Hamill, it was a necessary one. What audiences did not know was that Hamill was desperate to break free from the typecasting of Luke Skywalker. He did not want to be a science fiction hero for the rest of his life. It was not just a role, it was a career-defining choice. He actively sought out Sam Fuller, a director he revered, and took a massive pay cut to play Griff. The role allowed him to show a completely different range, playing a character who was traumatized, complex, and ultimately broken by war. It was not just acting, it was a deliberate act of artistic rebellion. Hamill's performance, nuanced and heartbreaking, is a testament to his desire to be taken seriously as an actor, a goal he achieved with this powerful against type performance. Number 11, the film's final scene at the asylum was almost cut. The film's poignant, surreal ending, where the sergeant finds his men in a mental asylum, was the heart of Sam Fuller's vision. What audiences did not know was that the studio found the scene confusing and depressing and demanded it be cut. They wanted a more conventional, heroic ending. This was not just a suggestion, it was a battle for the film's soul. Fuller fought ferociously to keep the scene, arguing that it was the only logical conclusion to his story. The point was not that the soldiers won the war, it was that they survived it, but at a terrible cost. The asylum scene was not just an ending, it was the film's entire thesis statement. The fact that Fuller managed to keep it in the theatrical cut, however truncated, is a minor miracle. It is the scene that elevates the film from a simple war movie to a profound statement on the psychological cost of conflict. Number 10. The film portrays war not as glory, but as a job. The Big Red One completely rejects the idea of the warrior hero. There are no speeches about freedom or glory. There are no slow motion charges set to soaring music. What audiences did not know was that this was Sam Fuller's deliberate choice, born from his own experience. For him and the men of the 1st Infantry, war was not an ideological crusade, it was a job. A terrible, terrifying, and absurd job, but a job nonetheless. The sergeant's philosophy is simple: survive, kill the enemy, protect your men, go home. It was not about patriotism, it was about survival. This stark, unglamorous portrayal was revolutionary. It strips away all the Hollywood myth-making to show the infantryman's reality. A terrifying, monotonous, and deadly profession. This job-like approach to war would influence countless films, from Platoon to Saving Private Ryan, making Fuller's forgotten film one of the most influential in the genre. Number 9. The film was shot in Israel on a shoestring budget. To capture the varied landscapes of the European and North African theaters, the production did not travel across continents. It went to one place, Israel. What audiences did not know was that this decision was born from financial desperation. The film was an independent production, and Israel offered tax breaks and cheap labor that made the low budget possible. It was not just a location, it was a lifeline. The cast and crew endured grueling conditions, shooting in the desert heat for the North Africa scenes and in the cold, muddy fields for the European sequences. The production was so underfunded that often there was only enough money for one take of a complicated shot. This was not just a challenge, it was a constant state of crisis. The scarcity of resources, however, forced a creativity and rawness that perfectly matched the film's gritty aesthetic, turning a financial limitation into an artistic strength. Number 8. Sam Fuller fought to get the film made for over 25 years. The Big Red One was not just a movie Sam Fuller wanted to make, it was his life's work. He first wrote the script in the 1950s based on his own wartime experiences and diaries. What audiences did not know was that for the next 2 decades, he tried and failed to get it made. Every major studio in Hollywood passed on the project. They found it too dark, too episodic, and too cynical. It was not just rejected, it was actively dismissed as unfilmable. Fuller refused to give up, rewriting the script countless times and attaching it to various stars who eventually dropped out. This was not just a development process, it was a 25-year war of attrition with the Hollywood system. By the time he finally secured independent financing in the late 1970s, Fuller was in his late 60s, making the film not just a creative achievement, but a victory for one of cinema's most stubborn and uncompromising artists. Number 7. Lee Marvin and Sam Fuller brought real combat trauma to the set. The dynamic between director Sam Fuller and star Lee Marvin was the film's secret weapon. Both men were World War II combat veterans. Fuller served in the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One. Marvin was a United States Marine who was severely wounded during the Battle of Saipan, earning a Purple Heart. What audiences did not know was that their shared experience created a bond and a tension that defined the entire production. They were not just making a movie, they were reliving their past. Marvin did not need to be told how to hold a rifle or what fear looked like. He knew. Fuller did not need to explain the absurdity of war. Marvin had lived it. On set, they would often speak in a shorthand of shared trauma. It was not just a director-actor relationship, it was a meeting of 2 brothers in arms, channeling their real-life ghosts into the fabric of the film. This authenticity is the invisible ingredient that makes the film so profoundly powerful. Number 6. The studio forced Fuller to cut the film by over 2 hours. The most brutal fact about The Big Red One is the story of its original cut. Sam Fuller delivered a film that was, by most accounts, nearly 4 hours long. It was his complete, uncompromising vision. What audiences did not know was that the studio, Lorimar, took one look at the epic and panicked. They deemed it unreleasable and too long for commercial audiences. They did not just ask for edits, they ordered Fuller to cut it down to under 2 hours. This was not just a suggestion, it was a massacre. Against his wishes, the film was hacked to pieces. Entire subplots were removed, character development was stripped away, and the rhythm of the campaign was destroyed. Fuller's original cut, a sprawling, novelistic masterpiece, was butchered into a disjointed, confusing shadow of its former self. The 1980 theatrical release is not the big red one. It is the big red one, the studio's version. Number 5. The film used real amputees to portray wounded soldiers. In one of the most shocking and ethically complex decisions of the production, Sam Fuller chose to use real amputees to play the roles of wounded soldiers. What audiences did not know was that this was not a special effect. It was a raw, documentary level commitment to realism. Fuller felt that no actor, no matter how skilled, could accurately replicate the visceral reality of a man who had lost a limb. He wanted the audience to see the truth. It was not just a casting choice, it was a moral imperative. The scenes in field hospitals are consequently among the most difficult to watch in all of cinema. The authenticity is unsettling and heartbreaking. While today such a choice would be fraught with ethical debate, in Fuller's hands, it became an act of profound respect for the real wounded veterans, ensuring their sacrifice was depicted with unflinching honesty, not Hollywood artifice. Number 4. The film's restored version was assembled from lost footage. For decades, fans of the film wondered what had been lost in the studio's cuts. The answer was almost nothing short of a miracle. What audiences did not know was that after years of searching, film critic and historian Richard Schickel discovered the missing footage. It was not in a pristine vault, it was mislabeled and sitting in a dusty corner of the Warner Brothers archive. The studio that had butchered the film had inadvertently preserved its soul. It was not just a discovery, it was a resurrection. In 2004, Schickel, working with Fuller's original script, assembled a reconstructed version, adding back over 40 minutes of footage. This was not just a director's cut, it was the film Sam Fuller had always intended audiences to see. The reconstructed version, now known as the Big Red One, the reconstruction is considered the definitive version. A masterpiece finally restored after being lost for over 20 years. Number 3. The film is dedicated to the real soldiers of the 1st Infantry Division. At the end of the film, a simple title card appears, dedicated to the ones who did not come back, especially to the 4 infantrymen of the 1st Division who died in my squad on D-Day, Anzio, and elsewhere. What audiences did not know was that this was not just a generic dedication. It was Sam Fuller's personal memorial. He was naming the ghosts he carried with him his entire life. The film is not just a war story, it is a tombstone. Fuller spent his career making tough, gritty genre pictures, but with the Big Red One, he was finally able to build a monument to the men he fought alongside and could not save. It was not just a movie, it was an act of remembrance, a promise that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. This simple, powerful dedication transforms the entire film, revealing it not as a work of fiction, but as a testament, a final, solemn roll call from the last man standing. Number 2, the famous killing the horse scene was based on a real incident. One of the film's most disturbing and memorable moments involves a soldier having to shoot a wounded horse to put it out of its misery. It is a scene that encapsulates the film's brutal philosophy. Killing is sometimes an act of mercy. What audiences did not know was that this scene was taken directly from Sam Fuller's own wartime experience. It was not just a powerful piece of writing, it was a memory. Fuller recounted the story in his autobiography, describing the horror and the strange, sad necessity of the act. By putting it in the film, he was forcing the audience to confront one of the war's ugliest, most intimate truths, that in the midst of all the human killing, the act of putting a suffering animal down could be the most emotionally scarring thing a soldier would do. It was not just a scene, it was a confession, a moment of pure, unvarnished truth from a man who had been there. Number 1, the film was originally intended to be a silent movie. Perhaps the most surprising fact about the Big Red One is Sam Fuller's original conception. He wanted to make a silent film. What audiences did not know was that Fuller, a master of visual storytelling, believed the purest way to convey the experience of war was without dialogue. He felt that words were inadequate to express the chaos, fear, and camaraderie of combat. It was not just a stylistic choice, it was a philosophical one. He planned to tell the entire story through images, sound effects, and a musical score. While the studio would never allow for a silent epic in 1980, Fuller's visual style retains the DNA of this original idea. The film is filled with long stretches without dialogue, communicating everything through the actors' faces, the movement of the camera, and the stark compositions. The Big Red One, in its final form, is essentially a sound film that desperately wants to be silent. A testament to a director who believed the most powerful stories are the ones you do not need words to understand. Bonus fact, the original negative was found, labeled as trailer footage. The story of how the lost footage was rediscovered is almost as dramatic as the film itself. When Richard Schickel began his search for the missing scenes, studio executives assured him the footage had been destroyed years ago, a common practice to save vault space. What audiences did not know was that Schickel refused to give up. He convinced an archivist at Warner Brothers to do one last, thorough search of their inventory. In a forgotten, uncatalogued section, the archivist found several film cans labeled, ironically, the Big Red One Trailer Materials. It was a clerical error, a mistake made by a long-gone studio employee that had accidentally preserved cinematic history. Inside those cans was not trailer footage, it was the master negative of Sam Fuller's original 4-hour cut. It was not just a discovery, it was a cinematic miracle, a pure stroke of luck that saved a masterpiece from the ashes, proving that sometimes the most important truths are the ones that are simply misplaced. The Big Red One stands today not just as a great war film, but as a testament to the power of a single artist's vision. It is a story of survival, both on the battlefield and in the corporate trenches of Hollywood. What we see in the restored version is not just a movie, but a victory for Sam Fuller's 30-year battle to tell his truth, a victory for the memories of the men he served with, and a victory for artistic integrity over commercial compromise. The film's legacy is a powerful one. It reminds us that the most authentic stories are often the most difficult to tell, and that the true cost of war is not measured in territory gained, but in the quiet psychological wounds carried by those who survive. It stands as a raw, unflinching counterpoint to the more heroic, fantastical war films, insisting that we look at the grunt, the survivor, the man who simply did his job and tried to go home. The next time you watch The Big Red One, remember the battle it took to get to you. Remember the lost footage, the real veterans, and the 25-year struggle. Because in the words of the sergeant, the only glory is surviving. And in the case of this film, its survival is its greatest glory.